to you, Coach Gard. We have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way of saying thanks for speaking to us today. And I want to remind you at the end, if we have time for questions, to wait for the mics. I'll try to spot you and keep it going back and forth. But before we begin, Coach, we've saved part of our singing for you as a special tribute. So if you don't mind, we have a former Miss Wisconsin and a cheerleader alum leading the singing, and her husband at the piano. So you're in.
This is for you. Sing along since I know you know the songs, Coach. If you want to be a badger, just come along with me by the bright shining light, by the light of the moon. If you want to be a badger, just come along with me by the bright shining light of the moon. By the light of the moon, by the light of the moon, by the bright shining light, by the light of the moon. You're doing good. If you want to be a badger, just come along with me by the bright shining light of the moon. Great. And on Wisconsin, runs right through that line. Run the ball clear down the field. A touchdown, sure this time. You-rah-rah! On Wisconsin, right on for her fame. Fight, fellas, fight. Win this game. You-rah-rah, Wisconsin. You-rah-rah, Wisconsin. You-rah-rah, Wisconsin. Yay! Those are genuine 1970s cheerleading hand motions.
Don't be impressed. We do this for everybody. Coach Gard was named head coach, as we all know, of the UW-Madison on March 7th, 2016, a coaching veteran of more than 20 years. He's in his 15th season on the Badgers basketball staff, serving as the team's associate head coach since July of 2008. As associate head coach, in addition to the on-floor coaching duties, he was the Badgers recruiting coordinator, handled opponent scheduling, game preparation, and the creation of future game schedules. He also served as the director of the Badger boys basketball summer camps. So, Coach, I imagine it must be really great to have a lighter load and less stress now. Coach Gard came to the Badgers after spending 2 previous seasons as Bo Ryan's assistant at UW-Milwaukee, where he had responsibilities, again, in scouting, summer basketball camp operations, and on-floor coaching, as well as involvement with recruiting. And previously, before that, he served as an assistant coach to Ryan at UW-Platteville from 93 to 99. In his final year at UW-Platteville, Gard served as Ryan's top assistant in charge of recruiting, camp operations, and scouting, and also worked as an advisor at the university's admissions office. And before joining Ryan's staff in Platteville, he spent 3 seasons at Southwestern High School and 1 at Platteville High School, where he served in junior high and assistant varsity coaching capacities. He's a 1995 graduate of UW-Platteville with a degree in physical and health education, a master's degree in counselor education from UW-Platteville in 2007, and he and his wife, Michelle, have 2 daughters, Mackenzie and Peyton, and a son, Isaac. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Thank you. All right. Just to make you famous.
Thank you. They warned me what the turnout would be here. And this is phenomenal. I think, Angela, where'd she go to? You were a freshman my first year at Wisconsin, right? Was that, we've been, you got, okay. And I know a lot of you probably had the same thing. I would have been here much earlier, but I think I made lap after lap after lap around the square trying to find a place to park. And my wife, Michelle, kept going, I think you're supposed to be right here. I think you're supposed to be right there. I said, no, we can't park there. So finally we were able to find a spot to park And to the sponsors and everybody, thank you. We had our oldest daughter just get confirmed a couple weeks ago, and I thought I saw a lot of sponsors there. So for all of you guys, congratulations to all the new members as well. First of all, I want to make sure I acknowledge, as I walked in and I was introduced, I want to make sure that my better half, as they always say, there's behind every successful person, there's a person that really runs the show and calls all the shots at home and does all that. So I stand behind my wife, Michelle, all the time and make sure. But my wife, Michelle, here, who actually I know I don't have to get into stories. You probably have your own significant others that have made sacrifices throughout their careers. It was 1999. We were just engaged because our anniversary was just last week, so I know 16 years was 1999 when we got married in 2000. But 1999, we had just gotten engaged, and Michelle was in Glendale over in, or actually in Fond du Lac, correct? No, in Milwaukee, in Hamilton. You had moved so many times I couldn't keep track.
It was Michelle.
It was Michelle. It was you, right, Michelle? She had just taken a job. So I'm in Platteville now. Get this, making peanuts. Had just taken a job at one of the elementary schools in Lancaster. So for those that are familiar with the southwest corner of the state, Lancaster is about 20 miles from Platteville, a little further to the west and a little further to the north. So she called me one night and said, "Hey, Greg, guess what? I got the job at Winskill Elementary. I'm going to be the elementary school principal." And she had started in speech and language and then gone into administration and worked on her master's degree, and then she has more degrees than I do, years in coaching, so she is very well prepared for that position. So she takes the job. We think I'm staying at Platteville and all that, and Bo is staying, and pictures on the front page of the Grant County Herald Independent. Roddick, at the time was her maiden name, Roddick, takes Winskill Elementary leadership poll, whatever. 2 weeks later, I have to make a phone call. Michelle, guess what? You don't have to move. I got good news and bad news. One thing is you don't have to move. She's like, "Why?" "Well, Coach Ryan just took the job at Milwaukee. We're coming your way. You don't have to." The bad news is, if you want to stay with me, probably we're gonna have to talk about this job thing. And she was terrific. She ended up getting another administrative job, and the rest, as they say, is history, I think. But obviously, I owe a lot to her. You've heard a lot about my past, and that's been in the news a lot in terms of my trek and my journey through things. And I did start as a junior high coach at Southwestern High School in Hazel Green a long time ago, and then we were able to make the trek through the high school ranks and the junior high ranks, and then on to Coach Ryan's staff at Platteville, and then Milwaukee, and now here at Wisconsin. So for us, it's been an extremely special ride. Michelle's been with me for the greater part of that since the mid-1990s, and I couldn't find a better person to be on this journey, and I wouldn't be here, in all honesty, for those that are in different leadership positions. And she was an administrator most recently in the Oregon School District, and her schedule was more hectic than mine. So we get a chance to chat on leadership and a lot of those type of things a lot, and converse different. It's amazing how similar Nigel Hayes and fifth graders are to each other. So we get sometimes we jockey back and forth on how does she handle fifth graders or sixth graders or those type of things. So Nigel's really not like a fifth grader, but there are some very unique and ironic comparisons to those leadership positions. But first of all, before I get into anything, I really, and I've tried to make a point of this everywhere I've been, and by the end of June I'll probably have touched every corner of the state. But having been in this state my entire life, has been well documented, I've had a lot of chances to leave. I had chances to leave at Platteville, had chances to leave at Milwaukee, could have stayed as the head coach at Platteville. When Bo left back like I said, in 99, could have stayed in Milwaukee. Had numerous chances to go in other spots from both those positions, and then usually multiple times every spring. This was always a very hectic time for us, never knowing where we're going to live, if we're going to have to move, what's going to happen from an employment standpoint. But it always worked out where I was able to stay. And for me to be in this position standing here as the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. I take this extremely seriously. Obviously, I'm extremely humbled and extremely honored to be your head coach at Wisconsin. But I also, as I've been in front of larger groups, smaller groups, individuals, want to make sure I thank you. And I know I see a lot of different faces that I know in the crowd that have been with us on this journey. But this doesn't happen alone. Somebody from the little town of Cobb, Wisconsin, doesn't get to this position without thousands of people standing behind them, with them, alongside of them, helping them through this journey. So for me, being a lifelong resident of the state of Wisconsin and having to be able to trek through my career and not have to leave the state, you know how rare that is? As I talk to different colleagues around the country and they're bouncing. Now, basketball coaches aren't quite as nomadic as football coaches, so my roster or my resume doesn't go as long down the list in spots as what Paul Chris go. But how surreal, neat, cool is it to have, Coach Chris in football, who Michelle actually went to high school with. He was a few years older than her, Platteville High School, but have two head coaches in two of the sports be from the state of Wisconsin, having grown up in the state of Wisconsin. Paul's ventured a few other places through the CFL and the NFL and a few other places that basketball coaches, like I said, aren't near as nomadic. But I want to make sure I pass on the message to all of you. Thank you for everything you've done for me and our family and our program throughout the years. And whether it's been at Platteville, I know faces that I've recognized in here all the way back for the last 20, 25 years. Milwaukee, and then obviously the last 15 here in Madison have been unbelievable. So on behalf of me, Michelle, and our three kids at home, I have a freshman, Mackenzie, who's a freshman at Oregon High School, a son, Isaac, who's in 7th grade, and then a daughter, Peyton, who's in 2nd grade. They're probably sleeping at their desks right now because they were up a little late last night at the Carrie Underwood concert. Isaac texted me at one point during the concert, said, as Carrie came on stage, and the other two performers were really good too, he said, "Dad, he's on the end of the row, and I'm at the other part of the row amongst family members," and he said, "Dad, what's going to happen first, a power outage, or are we going to lose our hearing?" It was his first, 12 years old, it's his first live concert, so he hadn't, and I thought I walked through the door, and all the CSC security people know me by first name. "Hey, Coach, how you doing?" I said, "It's the first time I've come in here with a ticket in a long time. Usually I've gone in through the secret way, but they wouldn't let me go to my parking spot last night." But on behalf of myself, Michelle, and the three of us at home and everything, thank you for everything you've done. I mean, it's been phenomenal, the ride, the journey we've been on, whether it's been the last 25 years or the last year. It's been well documented what we've gone through as a family. Coming up on some anniversary moments here, not so ones that you really want to remember, but my dad battling brain cancer, actually was diagnosed about a year ago exactly, through that journey and passing away at the end of October, and then into the whole interim phase that we went through this year. Like I said, there's no way we could go through that without the support, the care, the concern, whether it was emails, pats on the back, phone calls, notes, or your thoughts through this whole thing. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts to you. We really appreciate, and I understand how special this place is. I always knew, I thought I knew, when I went through that 6 months with my dad, and then into the interim process from mid-December through when Barry finally made up his mind in mid-March. The support and just the how you guys have kind of put, as fans and supporters, put your arms around us. I cannot say thank you enough. So thank you from all of us. So it has been. It's been a wild ride, to say the least, over the last 6 to 8 months. Obviously, extremely. This doesn't happen also without the support and the togetherness and the culture of our players. When I walked into that locker room after Coach Ryan announced he was going to retire on the 15th of December and kind of tried to rally the troops, the bewildered looks I had on faces, some were like, okay, I know what's going to happen, and here we go. Others, there was a little bit of bewilderment and shock. Obviously, whenever that happens to somebody between 18 and 22, and we had a lot of 18-year-olds in that locker room with 7 or 8 freshmen in there, their world was turned upside down a little bit. But their willingness to rally together, as I mentioned, it's senior night, and I also mentioned a week ago at our banquet, how our fans had rallied behind when our players needed the support the most. Badger fans were there the strongest. So, but how they changed and were able to grow and mature with all we had to replace from the year before, and then the topsy-turviness of the coaching situation. That doesn't happen to go win 11 out of 13 or whatever happened there, 9 out of 10, as we came down the stretch in the Big Ten season without that locker room and that culture bonding together. So we've got a special group of young men in that locker room that matured a lot over the last, so they had to grow up in a hurry through December, January, February, and March. And it's not, as I told them, the first I waited through the media and wanted to hear it come from the outside about the word audition. And as soon as I heard that, the next day in the locker room, I said, guys, this is not an audition. This is not about me. This is about how the 17 of you can rally around our one senior, Jordan Smith, who's got 3 months left in college, and how can we make this the best 3-4 months, however long we get to play, as good as an experience as possible. And don't worry about my position, my job, anything like that. This is not going to be on an audition. I'm not going to let the last 26 years of my career trek be impacted any way but positively about what's going to happen in the next 3 months. So fortunately, they were listening. They bought in. But that's what happens when you surround yourself with good people. And you know that as different leaders of businesses, schools, community, whether it's nonprofit, charity events. When you surround yourself with good people, great things can happen. And fortunately, like I said, that group of 17 guys really bought in and listened and worked, and we had a few bumps in the road. We had some maturing to do. But that doesn't happen to get to that point and make the rally to the Sweet 16 without the cohesiveness and the culture. As I've also often been asked by the media, wow, what'd you do in terms of on the court? They've made so much progress. They've been able to do this, that, win at Iowa, win at Maryland, rally and beat Michigan State to start the string here. I said, you haven't seen it's changed 10 times in the locker room. You think if it's improved on the floor, you got to see how they are in the locker room. And not that it was a bad culture, but it was an immature culture from a standpoint of we didn't know where the leadership was going to come from. And the leaders who were supposedly wearing that hat weren't quite sure how to do it. So that's, like I said, when we had good people around us and we're able to give some direction, obviously our staff did a very good job of pointing everybody in the right direction, but it's still about those guys and what they do day in and day out with the practices and how they perform in games and how they rally around each other. That's really where it all started, and that's the heartbeat of what we do, and that's why we do what we do. And people still ask me, what's your favorite thing? Is you get to be Grand Marshal of the Crazy Legs. I even get to be Grand Marshal of the Cobb Cornboil Parade in mid-August. So I knew I hit the pinnacle right there when I got that phone call. I was in. I'm moving up. But still the most probably, I love these community events. I've got my calendar decked with them over the next few months between appearances and speaking engagements. And I think I took a picture with every first grader in the Barnefeld School District this morning that was doing tours. It's that time of year where all the teachers are having field trips and they all kind of come to the Cole Center. But I posed with, I think, every first grader in Barneveld this morning, individually and collectively. So everybody in Barneveld should have a picture. If you have any relative in Barneveld, you will have a copy of the picture by tonight. But different events like that I love doing that. I got asked that when we arrived in Philadelphia for the regional. The TV networks follow us around and say, Coach, you really look like you enjoy this. I said, actually, I do. I always have. I've maybe not been in quite the spotlight that a head coach is, not having been in that position before, but it's something I've always been. I always shoot people pretty straight. I think they appreciate that about me, and that's, I think, what's really helped me in this position. Being a Wisconsin resident, I think the fans and the reception I've gotten from different parts of the state is that you see me as one of you, and I see myself as also sitting in your seat and know trials and tribulations and the backbone and the fiber that goes into the state and what you appreciate. And like I said, I think that's really made it. It adds an extra layer of specialness to this for me and obviously our family. But so we're doing a lot of that right now. Our players have one more week of class. Actually, if you ask them, it was 3 more days of class. today, tomorrow, and Friday, and then we're into finals next week. And then we're actually done working them out from what we can do with them as coaches, and they'll go home until about June 13th, to be exact. They'll start their 8-week summer school session then. We'll have 2 hours a week with them during that time, along with our strength coach, Eric Helen. Will have them as well until about August 5th, when that 8-week session ends, and then they go home again, and we bring them back for the end of August, first part of September when school starts. So it'll be been a busy spring so far. It was much easier when I was just coaching and doing practice and that. Now it's kind of, I almost need a chauffeur some days. But it's been fun. It's been a very good busy and a very happy busy from that standpoint. So what I'm going to do now is to allow you to ask questions, because I know that sometimes takes us in directions that you want to talk about, and if I'm legally allowed to talk about it, I will. If I'm not legally allowed to talk about it, I know there's a police officer standing in the back, and she'll make sure that, or sitting in the back, we'll make sure that, but it's all with the NCAA rules. If there's something that navigates into those waters I can't talk about, then I'll let you know that. But do we have the floating mic, or are we just going to yell them out? Or
A couple of them. One's here, one's there, and so I'll spot them for you.
Okay.
If you want to do that. Go ahead.
Coach, thanks very much for coming, and of course, congratulations and good luck on next season.
Thank you.
On those rare occasions when you're in a tournament and due to bad officiating, you lose an early round, is the inclination to root for the team that beat you so you can say you lost to the champion, or to root against them?
Or it's just to go to a beach where you can't see a TV. Usually once it happens, you're just like, hey, forget it, we're going on, let's go. For me, it probably wouldn't be a beach. It'd be, well, the problem is by that time of year, if you're knocked out early, the ice hasn't melted on the lakes in northern Wisconsin yet, so I can't go fishing. I would say it depends on who beat you. I think if somebody you really respect, you would, I think there's always that camaraderie amongst staffs, and the world of college basketball is really pretty small. It's 1 degree of separation, really, from program to program. I think there's always a inclination to root for Big Ten teams for the most part. I wouldn't say I root for all 13 of them, but there's most of them I would root for. But I think for the most part, I think there's always a respect level. So we didn't get knocked out that early, so I'm sure you're not referring to Notre Dame. Although I made sure when I walked up here, I did not drop my phone for another turnover. Made sure we held on to that. Actually, Mike Bray is coming into town this weekend to speak to our Coaches versus Cancer Gala on Saturday night. So Mike's a very good guy. So I had that game, if you were referring to that was kind of a coin flip, really, there. I would have liked to play North Carolina because I thought we would have given them. We had some things that the spacing and how we do things has always given them trouble. The swing and some things like that. And I know talking to their assistants on the road when we were recruiting in Dallas and New York in a couple weekends in April, that they were not looking forward to playing us. Talking to one of the assistants that had the scout, they were really rooting for Notre Dame from a standpoint. They had played them before, twice in their league, obviously. And then also our battles with North Carolina, having just beaten them a year ago, obviously 2 different teams totally, but we had played them before 2005 in a regional final. And I would have liked to have a crack at them, and unfortunately that doesn't happen. You have to finish off games, and the 19 seconds at the end, not that anybody's counting how much time was left when we turned the ball over the first time of 3 at the end. But that, those things happen. We also stole a couple as I look back, and we had a kid miss a layup again versus Pitt for us to win, and then obviously everybody knows how the Xavier game played out down the stretch. So eventually, if you are in enough of those situations, you're going to be on both sides of the coin. You just try to end up being on the happy side more so than the somber locker room side.
Coach?
Yes.
When you took over, you brought back the old Wisconsin swing offense, which you just mentioned, and it worked wonderfully. How do you feel about the swing going forward? Is that your offense going forward, or you've got some new ideas?
Well, I think you're always looking for new ideas. I think, but we also have not come anywhere where we can be or need to be within the swing. I always joke that we were crawling. We still had training wheels on it during the season. So from what we worked on in the spring, the little bit we had them for 2 weeks before we got into this finals period when we could work them out, we worked on that some. They'll play in their pickup games and run that throughout the summer. We'll also work on it in our workouts, in that 8 weeks that we have them here. And then obviously we'll have a full fall to prepare. And I always said it would have been a lot nicer to go into that experimental phase of putting in the swing and trying to play more guys off the bench had I not had Purdue and Maryland and Indiana staring down the barrel at us. So late December was maybe not the best time to experiment, but I also, on the flip side, I don't think we're able to turn things if we don't change some things. So I've never been afraid of change, and in fact, that's ironic. I stole that line from Coach Alvarez when right before he introduced me to the team, mid-December. He said, "Embrace change," addressing to the players. Don't be afraid of change. Embrace it. You can grow from it. Because as he mentioned, he had to do it. He's had a few of them he's walked through with football, from his own retirement to Brett leaving to Gary leaving and Paul coming in. So you have a tendency to find out that 18 to 22-year-olds are more resilient maybe than we are as adults, and they're a little more rational with their thinking. Maybe we are at that point in time. But there was some things that we needed to change. I just thought that helped us. Floor spacing got better, gave our freshmen some more direction and some continuity of what to do. It got us to the free throw line a little bit more. So there was things statistically that improved that you can see on paper, but also I think it helped put some of our freshmen more at ease in terms of what was coming and put them more on track, so to speak. So in terms of where we are, we can get a lot better with it. We'll always have things, but I'm careful not to try to reinvent the wheel. We have to be cautious with what we'll do. We'll probably do more things from a defensive standpoint in terms of trying to improve and tweak and adjust some things. Maybe things that won't be quite as noticeable if you really don't study us in depth. I'm sure there are people in here that do study us in depth, but we're going to really try to improve in all areas. Can't be caught standing still.
Coach Gard, thank you. John Bonsidville, I'm glad that you're here. Congratulations on an amazing season. In basketball you can teach basics, but one of the things that's hard to teach is a player to learn to pass to where the player's going to be, right? So using that analogy in your program, you've got an idea where your program wants to go, I'm sure you do. And you may have already answered this in the previous question, but where are you going? How are you going to get there? And what strategy are you going to employ to make that all work for you?
Well,
that's a really easy question.
It is. First of all, I got to worry about where I have to be at 2 o'clock next. I have 2 calendars going now, it's so much, and I had Michelle tell me where to be. But I think to answer your question, it's 2-part. One, you can't forget what's made us successful. And I think that's what we have to, as Dick mentioned when he introduced the question about going back to old Wisconsin. What has made Wisconsin good? What has made us who we are? What has helped us sustain 18 straight years in the NCAA tournament? 15 straight years of finishing no lower than 4th in the Big Ten. To be able to do that, to have the highest winning percentage on the road in the Big Ten play over the last 15 years. It's some very, very simple things. Taking care of the basketball has been one. We saw how it got us in trouble at the end of just, that Notre Dame game. And not maybe necessarily even the 3 at the end. If we take better care of the ball before that, it doesn't come down to those 3 at the end. So those things. Defensively, as I've watched this league over the last 15 years and talking to people that have been in it a lot longer than me, that if you don't defend very well and you don't rebound very well and you don't want to play physical in this league, you're going to have a very hard time. And I think we've seen that in other schools that have tried to do it in different ways and maybe brought a flavor from a different part of the country in terms of style of play, how they want to play. Not that there's only one way to play. There's not. There's a lot of ways to do that. But you look at the history of this league, way before I was here, of how it was and what made programs successful. And that's what I've kind of looked back at as I study this. Okay, what has made us successful? What makes Michigan State successful? What has made Ohio State, Indiana, whatever you want to look. Michigan State's probably the best analogy right now, just because Tom has been there for so long. 12 years as an assistant, and then now the last, 18, 19, 20 as a head coach, more than that maybe. I mean, that was always the joke with, as I passed year 13 being an assistant, he joked with me on the road, like, you passed me. Now you only have Bruce Weber left to catch in terms of being, how long can you be an assistant at one spot? Tom was an assistant 12 years for Judd Heathcote before he took over. Bruce Weber was an assistant, I think, 18 years with Gene Cady before he moved on. So I was able to wiggle in the middle of them. So I'm number 2 in that. But, you look back at what has made teams historically successful. You can't lose sight of what your roots are. What are the roots of this university? What are the roots of this state? What do you appreciate as fans? What can we recruit to consistently? What type of players are accessible to us within the 5-6 state region? Now, are we going to recruit nationally here or there? I always tell our guys, don't chase rabbits, meaning don't spend a lot of time in coming up empty-handed, because that means we're not taking care of something somewhere else, specifically in our own backyard. So, Tom Crean gave me a great words of advice. Not that I've taken a lot of advice from Tom Crean, but he did. That's a little bit of a joke. He was at Marquette for a while, so he's a little bit of a rival. He told me a story of the whole Moe's Steakhouse entrepreneurship, of how the owner of Moe's Steakhouse started that, and then his goal was to have 100 restaurants. The problem was, as he went through that, the more restaurants he got, the more he neglected Moe's. And eventually the quality of Moe's went down. So basically his line after 10 minutes of talking to him was, don't forget to take care of your steakhouse. So don't forget to take care of what's the core root of what makes us good, and not try to spread yourself too thin. So will we tweak a little bit of how we play based on personnel maybe? I'd like to get deeper. I'd like to get more athletic. Part of that goes hand in hand. I think playing those younger guys this year help their maturity. They will grow. They will get more out of this off season by drawing on their experience from having played 10 minutes a game, 18 minutes a game, 20 minutes a game, 5 minutes a game than what they would have had they not played, or played much in much smaller proportions. So that will help them in the off season. So I think it's twofold. You're always looking to push the envelope, so to speak, and remain on the cutting edge, but also you have to remember what has made us good and what has made us successful. So it'll be a blend of the two.
Question over here, and then I think we need a mic up here. Another question, right?
Coach, a lot of us wonder whether Nigel Hayes is really ready to go to the NBA.
Me too.
Yeah. Can you just tell us what goes into a kid making that decision from your standpoint, his standpoint, the school, what all is involved in that process and how it's made?
Well, in respect to Nigel, I joked about him with the 5th grade thing. Nigel's a very mature, very intelligent, well-spoken individual, terrific job academically, will graduate. If he stays, he will only have 3 credits to finish up next year at this time, spring semester, so he could almost be in a point where he can graduate in 3.5. Has done a phenomenal job for us in the community, has been the face, the face of the program for a couple of years. He's in a very precarious situation, almost an enigma from a standpoint of he's not completely into the first round, he's not completely undraftable. He's kind of hovering in the gray area in the middle. So the process revolves around, about a month ago, right after the season, we submitted his name to the NBA Advisory Committee. And they've just started this in the last 3-4 years, where we can submit names of early entries, possibilities, to have their committee, which has grown from 12 to 25 this year. There's now 25 members on the committee that evaluate and give feedback on early entry possibilities. You're only allowed to submit their name once in their career. So, for example, 2 years ago we were going to do it with Decker, but Sam said no because I want to save it for after my junior year. He obviously didn't need it after his junior year because he was so high in the. We did it with Frank. We did it going into his senior year. We did it with Trayvon Jackson. Any of our seniors, we usually offer that opportunity to, or to be seniors, unless there's somebody that's really good as an underclassman. So they give us a little bit of feedback on that. We go through that process. We get their evaluations back. I'm not allowed to publicly talk about. In fact, I have to sign a document with the NBA that says I can't talk about what those 25 committee members told me. And then he goes through. He just got invited to the combine, so he'll go to that next. It's the 11th through the 15th And there he'll be measured, weighed, tested, run through the gauntlet, put under the microscope, everything, workouts, meetings with GMs, meeting with, the whole gamut of it. And then he'll have a little bit more feedback, and then he's got to make a decision whether to withdraw from the draft by May 25th. So he's in a position, fortunately, we have a player in this position, means he's well thought of. And fortunately also they've changed the rules in the last 2 years where they're allowed to go to the combine. They're allowed to enter early and then have time to withdraw. So in years past, you'd be really in the dark, so to speak, of trying to help him make this decision. So I've stayed in the shadows, tried to help him as much as possible, talked to a lot of NBA personnel, scouts, GMs, I got more phone calls I got to make on my drive here this afternoon to people that are checking in and want to do background checks, and they will dig deep. Everybody thinks the NBA is all about the glamour and the glitz, and they will send in FBI agents. They have even ones that are retired here in Madison last year with what they came through with Decker and Kaminsky. I mean, it's obviously a lot of money involved in those franchises, so they are very cautious on how they spend their money and the investigative work they do. So they really dig in deep, way more than what they watch just on TV. So that's kind of in a nutshell what they do in the process that Nigel's going through right now.
Okay, one more question right here, and then I think time will be up.
Hi, I'm Dan Deacon, a season ticket holder, so we've been enjoying Wisconsin
you.
basketball a long time. And we're not going to ask you about your biggest achievement because Michelle is here. Right. But we would like to know what you feel is your biggest regret and what you've learned from it.
I look back, I don't know if there's really been a regret, to be honest with you. I've looked back every year, and maybe I haven't looked back. I mentioned before about the opportunities to take different jobs and do different things. I never once caught myself 6 months later going, man, I wish I would have, or looking in the rearview mirror. I've kind of, some of some of those decisions you make based on professional reasons, some of them were based on personal reasons. And I think that has probably tipped a little bit in the last 15 years, having a significant other, having young kids also changes your philosophies on your maybe what you want to do, where you want to go, who you want to surround yourself with, those type of things. I base a lot of my decisions based on trust and gut instinct. So the things that I do in the positions that I either have to fill or I have to navigate towards or away from, a lot of it comes down to trust. And a lot of those decisions that I made were based on that gut instinct of looking at things, pros and cons, as everybody goes through when you take a job, make a big career decision, buy a car, Alan, all those things that, you weigh the pros and cons. You write them down. But still, once you look at that, I've had a lot of times the positives outweighed the negatives, but I still didn't do it. I don't really, can't say I have a regret. I think going through that whole scenario with my dad with the brain cancer over the last 6 months has given me more perspective. Not that I didn't have or had a bad perspective, but I think it fine-tuned some things a little bit for me. I think it also helped me appreciate the little things. And quite honestly, being a parent has made me a better coach. Going through that with my dad has definitely made me a better coach. It put that, as I mentioned in my press conference after Melo Trimble hit the 28-footer to beat us here at home, everybody in the media was like, oh, they're going to be distraught. How are you going to get those guys back? And how are you going to handle this much adversity? And I said, time out, guys. This is not adversity. We lost to a top 5 team on their All-American hitting a 28-footer with a guy right in his face. Let me tell you about adversity. And I talked a little bit about my dad, but also Khalil Iverson had lost his dad a year ago to a heart attack. And he's 17 years old as a senior in high school when that happens. We'd had Coach Paris lost his dad at a very young age. There's going to be, as I told the team, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to face in your life. If you haven't faced adversity yet, get ready, because you will. Losing a game to Maryland at home on that type of shot, okay, we deal with it. We learn from it, but that's not going to be your life's biggest challenge. So I think that perspective has really helped me and that whole thing. And I think the one thing that jumps out to me is that on the hundreds of cards and notes that we got after he passed away, they had written, a lady had written a note at the bottom, and it said, appreciate the little things in life. because one day you're going to look back and realize those were the big things. And I think that's one thing that I try to convey with our guys. They keep looking for something big, and there's going to be a big spotlight on it, and it's really a journey. It's a process, and I talked about process a lot with this group. They're probably sick of me using the name. In fact, sometimes I got up and said process, just to egg them on a little bit. But I think that we tried to, I'm more than just a basketball coach, and I probably do more of my role and my responsibilities are outside of that time in the practice floor. We wear a lot of hats as a coach. We're trying to help these young men grow and develop and get ready for that next phase of their life, and it's a lot bigger than just the 40 minutes you guys maybe see, on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So trying to keep that in perspective, and I think that has helped. So really looking back, I mean, did I make mistakes as a coach? Yep. Will I make more? Yep. Okay. I'm not that, what I would have done, used a timeout there, not used a timeout here. I was going to use a timeout against Xavier at the end line. Nigel came running over and said, Coach, let's advance it to half court, then call the timeout. I said, you're pretty smart. Let's do that. So if we miss that shot, then I look like, it's still about the kids, and the game is about them and making a play. Bronson still had hit a heck of a shot. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You have to own up to when it doesn't, and also rally and support. I think that was the biggest thing that, like I said, it was about them, not about me. And when you, like I said, make it about the people that you're with, and you surround yourself with good people, amazing things can happen.